Here to introduce our first featured reader, which will be Cyndi. Cyndi Kaye is an MFA candidate in fiction at SFSU. She's worked as an attorney and a mom. Technically, she's still both. While she may be a few years past her freshness expiration date, she's loved becoming a student again. Her stories have appeared in the Wheelbarrow Literary Magazine and Palo Alto Weekly. Being asked to read at Velro feels like being invited to sit at the MFA Cool Kids lunch table. Hopefully she won't spill her juice box. Please welcome Cyndi.
So I'm going to read about half of a short story that several of you have heard already. It's called The Yellow Umbrella. She never saw it coming. Swept up by a sudden shift in the already tunnel-like hot Chicago gusts, huffing through humid block-filled ramparts of high-rise buildings, double-paned windows, rooftop gardens, retail awnings, cars, and pedestrians, the oversized yellow umbrella came loose from its fitted metal tube-shaped dwelling in which, under normal circumstances, it peacefully resided all summer atop one of the Drake Hotel's outdoor cafe tables. To be clear, this particular umbrella came from the sidewalk table closest to the street in the third row, counting from north to south. The responsibility of the busboy who, between setting and clearing the cafe tables and not quite locking the mechanism that kept this heavy umbrella moored in its holder, was studying lines for his upcoming National Paper Towel commercial audition. And so, the yellow beast of an umbrella was freed by the ideal combination of kitchen spill absorbency and the physics of wind propulsion, accelerating on the back of a squall until it possessed the strength of a heavyweight champion's gloved fists, smashing firmly and unrepentantly into the back of Marley's unsuspecting head. Marley, a second-year associate attorney at Carter, Silverman & Chaikin, who had just exited the number 151 bus from downtown after a long, hot, dusty law library stack-filled day doing ancient research for an ancient lawyer, was walking past the cafe on the way back to her apartment, thankful to be outside, even in the swirling, muggy air, despite having to walk several blocks, holding the full skirt of her dress tightly against her legs to avoid the wind blowing it up around her waist, and truly didn't know what hit her. The entire episode, the umbrella's flight from its holder to the back of Marley's head, took only seconds. But for anyone across the street watching it unfold, the scene would play out later in their minds like a short, surreal modern art museum video, looping over and over again in a darkened room with no chairs. And when the Good Samaritans, who happened to be walking along Walton Street in front of the Drake Hotel, and within inches of the umbrella's trajectory, realized how lucky they had been not to have been hit by the umbrella, they quickly rushed to Marley's aid, picking her up off the sidewalk where she had somehow instinctively used her now badly scraped hands and knees to save her face from hitting the cement, sitting her down in a cafe chair, telling her what had happened, and calling for an ambulance, all while trying to stanch the bleeding at the back of her head by applying Drake Cafe napkins, unused ones of course, one after the other as they became soaked with blood. The shoulders of Marley's short-sleeved flowered sundress were now almost completely red, although the color looked like it had been matched to the print of roses blooming along the hem. Head wounds, the doctor would later tell Marley's husband Peter, can bleed excessively, even if the wound isn't too deep. And luckily, despite Marley's needing several stitches and a few staples to close the wound, not to mention having a section of her shoulder-length hair at the back of her head cut short and then shaved in order to put those stitches and staples in, giving her the look of either a rock star or an unsupervised toddler playing with scissors. Her injuries were actually not that bad. Except that she could now sing opera. Really sing opera, like an opera star. Like Renee Fleming or Maria Callas or Andrea Bocelli. Well, maybe not exactly like them just yet, but with practice in the future, she'd come pretty darn close. But Marley didn't know that yet. Nobody did. The emergency room resident patching her up slowly, oh so slowly and painfully, as he in his ill-fitting white coat and ice-cold hands had just graduated from medical school less than a month before, was focused on stapling her head, not requesting songs from La Traviata. Instead, as he worked, the resident barraged her with simple but annoying concussion-ruling-out questions. What's your name? Marlene Jacobs. Do you know where you are? Hospital, Northwestern. Do you know what happened to you? I fell. An umbrella tried to kill me. Where do you live? 6 blocks from here, 845 East Walt. What day, year, and month is it? Thursday, 1993, August. Who is the President of the United States? Bill Clinton and his wife. Just kidding. Are you dizzy? Not really. Nauseous? No. Peter is, though. Headache? Only from these questions. What none of the doctors in that emergency room could have realized then was that at the moment the yellow umbrella plowed into Marley's head, it bestowed some sort of neurological shock to the neural pathways in Marley's brain which lead to vocalization, irrigating those cerebral boulevards and allowing to blossom somewhere deep within her gray matter the ability to sing operatically. And while some people might consider that a traumatic brain injury, it honestly wasn't one. It didn't show up on the CT scans of her head that Marley had to have twice in 6 hours so that the hospital would let her go home, no longer worried that she'd suffered a major concussion or had an epidural hematoma that would suddenly make her drop dead days later in the middle of dinner or sex or a movie, or in the law library stacks where her body wouldn't be found for a week. In fact, the only lasting injuries from the whole debacle were to the yellow umbrella and the auditioning busboy's acting career. The umbrella, after multiple trips to the dry cleaner, was declared to be permanently stained with Marley's blood and was thrown unceremoniously into the hotel dumpster, while the busboy, shocked at the sight of the havoc his inattentiveness had wreaked, forgot about the commercial audition and re-enrolled the next morning in his master's degree program in medieval German literature at the University of Chicago. No one realized Marley's newly formed talent even existed until almost a month after the umbrella hit her. By then, the staples in Marley's head had been removed, her stitches had dissolved, and the medical bills had been paid, in part by Marley's insurance, the rest by the Drake Hotel after 3 polite requests to the manager and one final not-so-polite one, written by Marley on Carter Silverman stationery and signed by Chad Silverman, Esquire. Her hair was growing back slowly, but she still needed to wear scarves or sun hats to cover the raw, ugly space at the back of her head while at work or out in public. No, it wasn't until Marley started the car with the radio set to a classical music station broadcasting a 1975 performance recording of the lyric opera's Le Nozze di Figaro that she discovered her new operatic tendencies. Marley rarely needed a car in the city, since buses, taxis, or walking usually took her where she needed to go, and since Peter drove their Honda Civic, rapidly aging from the combination of Chicago winters and expressway potholes, to work in Lincoln Park 6 days a week. Peter was a line cook with a culinary arts degree. I have to start somewhere, Marley, he'd said, if we're ever going to open our own place. Working at Prairie, a trendy new restaurant near the zoo, downwind, unfortunately, from the priming house, that had gotten amazing first reviews but was starting to have trouble attracting return customers, and both his and Marley's working hours were long and late. And for a few weeks following Marley's accident, Peter had also assumed the delectable job of cleaning Marley's wound and changing the dressing, making him gag behind her back, although he lovingly told Marley the process was like basting and replacing the tinfoil tent on a small, vaulting Thanksgiving turkey. But the night Marley drove the Civic to pick Peter up at O'Hare, he had taken a rare couple of days off to visit his parents in Philadelphia, was when she learned with what gifts the yellow umbrella had anointed her. Walking toward the garage down the block where the Civic generally lived when it wasn't parked behind Prairie, Marley could see in the distance the Drake Cafe under outdoor lights, its tables filled with customers and those damn umbrellas still up and open, even at night, during an unusually warm September. She looked away, wondering if she should have sued the hotel after all. As an attorney, she knew the paperwork, time, and frustration a lawsuit would have meant, and the hotel had readily agreed, though it needed that reminder letter, to pay her out-of-pocket medical costs when she suggested that as compensation, rather than the lifetime of free cappuccinos they had offered. although she had thought seriously about the cappuccinos. But weren't umbrellas killing people everywhere? Hadn't her parents been sending her copies of more than you would imagine newspaper and magazine articles they had found researching their local library on the topic of people killed by umbrellas? Just 2 years earlier in California, according to a New York Times article they had sent her, one of the artist Christo's 1,760 yellow umbrellas, her parents were sure there was something about the yellow umbrellas specifically, set up as part of some international environmental movement. There were 1,340 blue umbrellas set up in Japan, but they didn't hurt anyone. Came loose in the wind, fatally crushing against a boulder a 33-year-old woman who was standing across the street admiring them. Then there was the article about Georgy Markov, the Bulgarian dissident writer, assassinated in 1978 on London's Waterloo Bridge by an agent of the Bulgarian secret police who used an umbrella to fire a ricin pellet into Markov's leg. Even Marley's parents found this article to be a stretch when compared to Marley's accident, but it made for good reading, so they sent it along. And of course, there were countless articles detailing in a horrific fashion all those poor, poor people injured by beach and pool umbrellas when all they had been doing was innocently seeking shade on hot, albeit windy days. Maybe I should have brought a class action, Marley thought, laughing to herself as she entered the garage, taking the elevator down to the 3rd floor below ground and sliding into the driver's seat of the Civic. The car still vaguely smelled of Peter, a mixture of sweat, fennel, coconut, and whatever the prairie soup of the day was 2 days ago. Marley found the smell to be at once comforting and troubling. When he opens his own place, Marley thought grimly, we'll both smell like this all the time. Our future children will be born smelling like this, and I don't even like fennel. She imagined herself sitting at the sauté prep station in the middle of a steaming restaurant kitchen, surrounded by bubbling pots filled with strange-smelling liquids and unrecognizable animal innards, her hands tied with butcher's twine to the restaurant's financial books, trying desperately to balance them. Marley sighed as she maneuvered the car up the exit ramp, carefully crept out into the nighttime traffic, and turned on the car radio, set by Peter during his drive home after his last dinner shift. Peter often said that he liked to listen to classical music with the volume turned way up on the drive home from work, so the loud but dulcet, wordless musical tones could remove from his mind and body the shrill, constant screaming of Prairie's bickering sous chefs. Tonight, however, an impossibly high-pitched female voice blasted suddenly through the speakers. Startled, Marley quickly turned the volume down, but for reasons she would never quite understand, she didn't turn the radio off or switch the channel. Instead, as she started driving the few blocks toward Michigan Avenue, she began to laugh at the singer's unending vibrato, forcefully oscillating through the unintelligible, was that Italian, Spanish, musical aria. But then, instead of laughing, she found herself singing along. Not with the words, of course. The umbrella didn't teach her operatic lyrics. She'd soon have to learn those on her own. But she discovered that she could mimic the singer, the scale runs, the vibrato, the full-throated, glorious voice Marley didn't know she had. Because, well, frankly, she hadn't had it until recently. When she realized how she was singing, Marley slammed on the brakes. She was between intersections, and luckily the only car behind her hadn't been tailgating. That didn't stop the driver from honking and flipping her off as she motioned for him to go around her in the other lane. Once he passed her, Marley slowly drove forward, gripping the steering wheel until she could turn down a side street. She found an empty space to pull into and parked. "What the hell just happened?" she said aloud. The radio was still on, and the female singer was still singing. Marley listened for a moment, then turned the radio volume all the way down and opened her mouth. Out came opera. Well, opera-like singing. Again. And it was glorious. Belting out her now luscious vocals from the depths of her diaphragm to the top of her wrecked, scarred, and covered by a light green bandana head, Marley suddenly felt something that no legal case, even the pro bono ones where she was unquestionably on the side of right, had ever made her feel: enraptured.